All right, hello everybody. When you look back at the time when your community organization, your organization found itself in the middle of a crisis, how did you handle it? Were you the one to lead your team or get your organization through what was going on? Did you have to assemble a crisis strategy team or a strike team to take on what was happening? When did you realize you were actually in a brand crisis? Hello, I'm Dr. M. Stalin, entrepreneurial strategist, helping to cultivate brand clarity for community organizations and those who want to create social impact. So we are doing a series entitled Your Brand Strategy in a Crisis. That's your brand strategy in a crisis. So the difference between a brand strategy execution in a crisis versus any other time is the urgency that is present. What it is when we think about a brand strategy. There's a couple of things we need to think about when we think about brand strategy. We want to look at brand strategy differently. We want to determine if this is a quote unquote typical project with the client, or is this just an everyday project with the client, right? When we look at a brand strategy differently, it's not just a typical project, but when a client is actually in a crisis, right? So that's the difference. As I continue to study this, there are experts in what I would consider traditional crisis management or crisis communication. You know, you have Miss Judy Smith, crisis management expert, known for her portrayal by actress Kerry Washington in the TV show Scandal. You have Dr. Erica James, who is the dean over at Wharton School of Business, and also a leading authority on crisis leadership. Another professor, professor of public management, Dr. Dutch Leonard of Harvard Business School, most known for his work and study in crisis management communication as relates to COVID-19. Now, the reason I mention these particular experts is the first thing you do when you embark upon that subject or approach a particular subject is you want to read and study what the experts are currently saying. What have they said? What are they currently saying, right? Regarding those particular three, there's a consistency across the board on their take when it comes to crisis communication, crisis management, and crisis leadership. But my intention is to look at these kinds of occurrences and implement an even stronger brand strategy, right? When you're looking at an organization that's in the midst of a brand crisis. So that's going to be the difference. Again, taking an effective look at what the experts have said and are saying and apply it to brand strategy execution, to a brand strategy execution plan for the benefit of the community that you're running, or the social impact organization that you're running, or the community organization that you're running, or even a nonprofit organization that you're running. So let's get into it, right? If you've not seen my previous video, helping you determine and recognize that your brand could be in a crisis, right? And the types of crises you can actually be in, I encourage you to check it out. The link is going to be in the description below or maybe somewhere up here. Okay, so today, right now, we're going to get into the first 4 things you need to do, the first 4 actions you need to take once you realize that you are in a brand crisis, right? There are 4 specific brand strategy steps that you need to take, the types of actions that you need to execute when the crisis has hit. Now, the truth is, there are lots of steps, lots of things you need to do, but we're going to talk about the first 4 to kind of help you streamline and focus. So let's put this in some context. So you've reached out to me directly, or maybe you talk to my office and you say, you know what, I'm in the middle of something. I feel like I'm in the middle of something and I need some help. You know, what do I do? So what we're going to do is, so we're all on the same page, we're going to first define brand crisis. And the things that I'm going to walk you through is the things that I would do if I was helping you directly. So first, let's define brand crisis. A brand crisis is a set or a series of negative events that is created or presented an emergency. It has created or presented an emergency. It's not always just one event. Sometimes it's a series of events that has taken place. And the result of a brand crisis can cause significant damage to the company's short-term, long-term vision, and that's the internal stuff. But it could also cause damage to the reputation, the outward stuff, right? It can lead to a loss of trust, customer loyalty, and brand equity. Brand equity is simply the positive influence, right, of the customer's perception of your brand, and the customer's perception of the experience, and maybe the opinion of your brand, right? So brand equity, again, is simply is a positive influence of the customer's perception of your brand, of their experience, and the opinion of the overall brand, right? So a positive brand equity or negative one can directly impact the sales and, again, its reputation, right? This is what directly happens with the organization. So now, to avoid and minimize the negative effect on brand crisis, an organization must put together an effective plan, and it must have an effective plan in place, and that prepares them and cultivates them for any potential brand crisis that could come into play. But sometimes we don't take the time to prepare a plan until after a plan has taken place. Hopefully some of y'all are different. So you know what, let's get back into it. Your brand is in a crisis. You need a brand strategy to execute when you're in that crisis, okay? So an urgent plan of action must be implemented and executed. So the very first thing you need to do to determine is if this is actually a standard crisis or is it a true crisis? According to Dr. Leonard, you want to determine if this current brand crisis is what he called routine, right? Or what I would call like a standard brand crisis, or is it just something that's a normal, typical crisis, right? Again, you want to know if this crisis for your brand is routine or is it a true crisis, right? It's simply that, so you can understand the level of importance that it is. So once you determine that, then you can take you to step one, right? So step one is to determine who's going to be in charge. All intents and purposes, that should be you. If you're listening to my video, you should be the one that's in charge. But let me give you more context. If it's not you, maybe it's someone like your chief of staff or some of the equivalent of that. If you don't have that someone in that particular role, right? Maybe it's your number two. It just kind of depends, but you want to have somebody that's going to be in charge. But ultimately it should be you. But you want to be 100% knowledgeable of what's going on, right? And that's what I'm going to share with you. So the first thing you want to do under that same umbrella is to determine what at least three people will be on your brand strategy crisis team. Now, if you're running a small organization and there's only you and one other person, then both of you have to be on it, right? But determine what three people will be on your brand strategy crisis team. You should already kind of have this in place, like I said earlier, but if not, it's okay. We're working through it now. Three people with different responsibilities. One to handle the social media and your website, one to handle like your staff and employees and stay in contact with them, maybe field questions, another one to kind of handle the clients and the stakeholders, right? And you at the helm, right? You should be all those different people that I just mentioned, the social media, website person, the staff, the one that's handling the staff and the employees and the clients and the stakeholders, you should be at the helm. They should all be getting your marching orders from you. So that's the first thing you want to do. Number two, you want to stop all communication, right? You want to stop all communication. It's important to communicate authentically and transparently with your audience, with your stakeholders. That includes your team, your staff, your clients, right? But you can't do it if you're not in control of the messaging that's going out, right? So first, stop all communication until you get enough information. Then you can actually come back with clearer communication message for all those involved. Now, it doesn't mean you stop communication forever, but remember, you don't have to rush to speak, but you have to speak immediately when you do. All right, number three, identify the problem. Most important part, right? But how do you do that? You have to ask this next question. So write this down. Is you as the leader or as the brand strategy expert, or if you're the one that's in charge of marketing, the first question we need to ask is everyone okay? Is everyone okay? Don't take this question for granted, right? You don't know how your team is going to react. Determine if everyone's okay. Allow them to vent, even if it's just for a few minutes. It's okay if it's a little chaotic for just a few minutes, but are they okay, right? In order to make effective strategic decision, you got to figure out if everyone's okay. Now, once you've done that, you want to figure out what happened. What the heck happened, and allow them to tell you. But sometimes people are holding stuff in, and so they got to let it out. So you let them get it out, even if it's a little chaotic, and you kind of get reorganized and regrouped, and you figure out what happened. Ask them what happened, what the heck happened, so you can figure out what to do next, right? And gather that information. Hopefully somebody should take notes on that if it's not you. And so you're capturing the information as necessary. And the next question with that, you just want to know what caused this to happen, right? This should be another question of yours. What caused this thing to happen? Again, next you want to determine who can give you a proper assessment, right? Who can give you a proper assessment? So you think about it for a second so in the beginning, we talked about determining at the beginning if this is a standard brand crisis or just a normal issue, right? So the person who can give you the proper assessment can help you to answer that particular question, right? Is it something that's really a standard brand crisis, or is it true crisis, or maybe it's something that could potentially evolve if it's not handled in a certain way? But it's usually you got to figure out who can give you a proper assessment, right? And then this is maybe like the fifth point, sub bullet point in this particular section under identifying the problem, right? You want to determine what this all means. What does this all mean, right? In other words, what are the repercussions of what is happening? Repercussions of what is happening. Are you gathering and interpreting this information? Now again, all communication is still stopped, right? But what does this all mean, right? What are the repercussions to your company, to the individuals, to the clients? How's everyone being affected? Now, ask your team at this particular point if they have any additional concerns or any questions for you, right? So with that, there's a cheat sheet for you, and I'm going to put this in the description below. It's like the 50 most common questions that you need to be prepared to answer to an external audience, right? When it comes to a brand crisis. Now, you can download this for free. Now, you want to take a minute. You can go through the questions to prepare yourself, right? This is kind of cultivating, kind of preparing yourself ahead of time. This is a shortened version of something similar that Dr. Cabilio created, but this is created through the eyes of brand strategy, a brand strategy execution plan, right? Think about it that way. Again, first step is to identify the problem, right? Third step is to identify the problem, right? Now, this section does have a few subcomponents. And so you think subcomponent B is to next identify your problem, right? That means what are the delays? What are the delays? What is the embarrassment that's taking place, or that could take place, or that will take place, right? What is the true impact, right? How is this affecting your ability to implement a marketing strategy? How do you need to stop your current marketing campaigns, right? Is there something that's out there that needs to stop immediately, right? Is it causing an embarrassment? You see it a lot of time with sometimes in the fashion industry. We won't get into the details. They've released this campaign, and it ends up just being an embarrassing mess, right? And that's directly affects their brand. So this is something that you would have to say, you know what? We need to adjust, make some adjustments. We stop the communication, and we need to pull back a particular marketing campaign. So it is possible that this information could come from someone who, may not actually be on the immediate brand strategy crisis team. In other words, you have to think about it like this. Who should you be talking to that you haven't currently talked to yet? Who should you be talking to, or who have you yet to talk to that you need to be talking to, right? Sometimes there's somebody that's sitting there with all the information, but no one's reaching out to them. Whether they keep introverted, they might not be willing to share the information, or they don't think it's their place, right? So figure that out. Somebody's usually somebody there that has some information that you could be sitting on that can shed some significant light to what's going on, right? And then number 4, this is the last step. Think about, we're just talking about the first 4 steps that you need to take care of when you realize that you are in a brand crisis. This is part of your brand strategy crisis execution plan, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to start building and directing folks to a temporary client communication site. You're going to start building and directing individuals, clients, customers, stakeholders to a client communication site. That's simply just a one-page website that will speak directly to the customers and to the clients and to the external stakeholders, right? But here's the deal with this. You don't have to put this on your webpage, on your homepage, excuse me. You don't have to put this on your homepage. It's probably the worst thing you can do. Maybe you can have at the top, that's speaking here, for different information regarding something that's not too specific, right? But people who know will know what it is, have it homepage.com/XYZ, right? This is something your IT department or your web team can get on right away, right? This is kind of starting to create like a communication hub where you can communicate directly with your clients, your customers, and your stakeholders, right? Exactly. Then you're going to have maybe links to social media on that same page, right? So again, the initial message on that site, though, which is referred to as a holding message, should read something that lets your clients and whoever needs to know to check back for more information as you're putting it together, right? Check back for more information as you're putting it together. If you can get a toll-free number, that would be great. Toll-free number that you can go ahead and just shut off, right? Don't convert your main line to a different number, a different toll-free number that customers and clients can call in to speak to somebody, an actual human being. A pre-recorded message is fine, but sometimes depending on the situation, when it comes to your brand, an actual human being might be better, right? So if you can get a toll-free number, help answer questions, that would also be a lot better, helpful to you and your team. And that's basically it, y'all. Those are the first 4 steps you need to take when you find yourself in the middle of a brand strategy crisis or a brand crisis. So just to review real quickly, what's the first one? Y'all remember? Do you remember what the first thing was? Determine who's in charge, right? That's actually you. And then number 2, stop all communication. And then number 3, identify the problem, right? The subcomponent of number 3 or 3B would be next, identify the real problem, right? What are the delays? What is the embarrassment? What's going to be, what's going to end up being an embarrassment? And then number 4, start building and directing folks to a temporary client communication site. So another fancy phrase for a web page that will speak directly to the customers, okay? And so that's how you want to handle it. Those are the first 4 steps you need to take when you find yourself in the middle of a brand crisis, right? This is what your brand strategy needs to start to look like. So continue back with us for the next part of our series, your brand strategy in a crisis. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. If you can like, subscribe, that would also be wonderful. Again, I am Dr. M. Stollard, and remember to keep pushing forward, drive your influence, and be intentional by using strategy.